And then you just create an archetype. And like, I think in a lot of ways, that's the Charlie thing to the furthest extreme.
Charlie loved life.
This is someone that wants us to buy this bullshit so bad. This is someone that legitimately wants us to buy this. I'm telling you, this is not real.
Why did Joe Rogan and Andrew Schulz suddenly start talking about Charlie Kirk's widow? And why did it sound like they were hinting at something they weren't supposed to say out loud? It didn't feel random at all. The whole mood in that studio flipped instantly. The kind of shift that makes everyone in the room sit up, wondering if they just heard something they weren't meant to. There was this tension, thick and heavy, like they both realized too late they'd crossed a line. You could feel it through the screen. Their voices dropped, their timing slowed, and that long pause, it wasn't silence. Oh, it was strategy. It felt like they cracked open a door to a secret that was never supposed to see daylight. Schulz was the first to speak again, and the tone in his voice gave it away. That mix of sarcasm with just enough hesitation to make you wonder if he knew he'd said too much. He joked about a guy saying things he shouldn't have, but then added, "If it were me, I'd tell that dude to chill." And that's when the whole internet went wild. Because right there, in that little half joke, was a warning. It wasn't about comedy anymore. It was about control. Rogan didn't interrupt him, not once. He just sat there quiet, his eyes low, and that small half smile creeping across his face. That look alone sent TikTok into chaos. Because when Joe Rogan goes quiet, people know he's thinking. And that tiny smirk, it said everything without saying anything. Viewers couldn't tell if it meant careful, true, or not here. But one thing was clear. It meant something. Hours later, clips from the episode blew up like wildfire. TikTok, Reddit, and X turned into detective boards. People slowing down the footage, zooming in, frame by frame, like they were analyzing top secret evidence.
Like, you want me to buy? This is not fucking the global fucking Academy Awards. I don't know what you got going on, sis. So I used to solve shit for a living. Let me tell you guys something. When someone's lying to you, the first thing they try to do is convince you, right? And the only way I can convince you is by invoking your emotion into my emotion. So if I'm angry, I want to make you angry, because if I can convince myself I'm angry, I'm psychologically thinking that you're convinced I'm angry. And so when you go, and he saw the face of his Lord.
That whispering part where she kind of half whispers, I've never heard any human being communicate like that. And I've seen a lot of people in these situations.
Every blink, every smirk, every twitch was examined like a clue. Some fans swore Rogan's eye movements gave it away. Others said Schultz's nod was the real tell. But everyone agreed on one thing. They were hiding something. It wasn't just the words. It was how they said them. The strange pauses, the mismatched grins, the jokes that landed too heavy. It all felt calculated, like they were letting an inside secret slip just enough to stir curiosity, but not enough to spill the truth. It was like they were sharing a private code on live air and only a few people could catch it. Then came the part that froze the crowd. Schulz leaned forward, lowered his voice, and whispered, "If you believe that's true, then you're special." He smiled. Rogan laughed, but the audience, dead silent. That awkward hush said more than any punchline ever could. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or hold their breath. That moment flipped the internet upside down. Millions of people started asking the same thing. What were they really hinting at? Why now? And why mention Charlie Kirk's widow of all people when the story around her is still so messy? Nobody had answers, but everyone had theories. The vibe was off, and that made it impossible to ignore.
I think he said a few things, and if I was his friend, I would say, don't say it like that. I know what you're trying to say, but don't ever say, when I go into a cockpit, I hope that the pilot, if he's black, is qualified. I know what you're trying to say. You shouldn't hire underqualified pilots. But saying it like that,
just because of the color of their skin.
He's probably not hanging out with black people, not knowing how offensive that's going to be.
Here's the thing. Rogan and Schulz are not amateurs. They know how to dance around a topic without touching it directly. That's why fans swore this wasn't a random slip-up. It was deliberate, like a breadcrumb dropped in plain sight. Some said it was just edgy humor, others claimed it was a coded test to see who was paying attention. But it didn't matter, and because the silence afterward said everything. There was no denial, no backpedaling, no quick joke to move on, just that long, uncomfortable pause and a glance that could start a fire. And that's what made it explode online. Not what they said, but what they didn't. Because sometimes the loudest confession is the quiet one that follows a nervous laugh. The internet caught it instantly. Comment sections filled with theories. They know something. They're covering for someone. That silence was way too intentional. Every podcast breakdown, every reaction clip was dissecting that single moment like it held the key to everything. And then the bomb dropped. Out of nowhere, mid-conversation, her name came up. Charlie Kirk's wife. Not with sympathy, not in passing, but sharp, deliberate, like a spotlight flicked on in a dark room. The tone shifted again, cutting through the laughter like a knife. Everyone went still because this wasn't about grief or remembrance. It was about action. That's what shocked everyone. Rogan wasn't talking about emotions. He was talking about moves being made. His voice was calm, steady, controlled, too controlled. And then came the line that turned every head online. There's something wrong with this. Just 5 words? But they hit like a siren. The energy in that room changed instantly.
For everyone who is watching this, restreaming this, if you think this is genuine, you are very special. You are very unique. This is some of the worst acting. Like, she would give fucking the people that are on those Hallmark shows a run for their money. Give me a break. Give me a break. You could restream me all of them all you want to. If you buy into this, this says more about you than it does about me.
Rogan's face hardened, Schulz looked away, and the crowd didn't know what to do. Laugh, gasp, or stay quiet. And in that exact moment, the internet decided something was off. Within hours, clips of that single sentence racked up millions of views. People were looping it, syncing it with old footage, trying to decode every breath. Was Rogan hinting at something hidden? Was Schulz trying to steer him away? Or did they both just stumble onto something they shouldn't have said at all? Nobody knew for sure, but the world could feel it. That weird tension, that unspoken message buried between jokes and glances. Because this wasn't just another podcast moment, it was a slip in real time. And sometimes it's not the words that expose the truth, it's the silence that follows. Within hours, social media caught fire. Every clip, every quote, every smile she'd ever posted was under a microscope. People dug through her photos like detectives on a mission, trying to decode some hidden message. Posts that once looked sweet or spiritual suddenly turned into evidence. Even her laughter was dissected. Some said it showed strength, others claimed it was all an act. Rogan and Schulz didn't accuse her of anything directly. They didn't have to. Their silence screamed louder than any words ever could. That's when things got dark. Because if Charlie Kirk had become a symbol to millions, his story didn't die with him. It mutated. And she became the new symbol, whether she asked for it or not.
So Charlie Kirk's wife, who the day Charlie Kirk was murdered, I said I felt for, I still do, for her and her kids, she's grifting now. Charlie Kirk is worth tens of millions of dollars. That's a fact. That's not an opinion. And his wife is going on social media and asking people for donations and money. What is she doing? Other than grifting, what else would you call that?
Every breath she took was now under surveillance. To some, her calm was grace. To others, it looked like strategy. Every post became a statement. Every pause became a theory. Her stillness drove people crazy. While the world spun with noise, she stood motionless and too calm, too collected. Some called it spiritual peace. Others swore it was staged. Either way, she turned into an enigma the internet couldn't stop talking about. And when Rogan and Schulz dropped her name, not during a big interview, but mid-chat like a slip, the internet lost it. Because when those two drop a name, it's never random. They both know their power. They know that a pause, a glance, or one unfinished sentence can flip an entire narrative. They've built their careers on making silence feel suspicious, on saying more by saying less. So when Schulz casually said Erika Kirk, the internet froze. Listeners knew immediately. That wasn't a slip, that was a signal. And wow, did it work. Within hours, those few seconds were everywhere. TikTok, Reddit, X looped, slowed, analyzed like crime scene footage. People froze every frame, zoomed in on Rogan's grin, paused on Schulz's nod, trying to catch hidden meaning. Was it a warning? A clue? A secret they weren't supposed to share? Nobody could tell, and that uncertainty only made the fire burn hotter.
If you're going to get donations, why wouldn't you use it for something like, I don't know, helping the homeless, doing something about those that are mentally ill, for example? There's so much you could do with these donations and money that can help society. Instead, she's going to be using it for herself. And I say to myself, your husband was worth tens of millions of dollars. Why are you grifting and asking for money before your husband is even 6 feet underneath the ground? I find this distasteful and I find it disgusting.
Theories exploded, and soon, one casual mention had snowballed into a cultural storm. Some believed it was all spontaneous, others swore it was staged, a deliberate drop to stir curiosity. Because once doubt hits the internet, you don't need to say anything else. The audience builds the rest of the story for you. That's the real trick. Suggestion. And Rogan and Schulz, they're masters at that game. Then came the part that made even longtime fans go quiet. They were joking about politics 1 second, all laughs. And then suddenly, Schulz leaned back, sighed, and said low, "You know what's weird? No one's really said what happened to Charlie's widow. That one sentence hit like a gunshot. Sharp, cold, and impossible to ignore." Rogan froze mid-breath. His eyes darted towards Schulz like he couldn't believe what he'd just said, but also like he knew that line wasn't random. If you've watched Rogan long enough, you know that look, that tiny smirk mixed with disbelief that means, "We're not supposed to touch this." Schulz tried to laugh it off, mumbling, "God, I'm getting old," but the energy shifted instantly. His voice cracked, his posture slumped. That wasn't humor, that was nerves. No one watching bought the just joking act. It didn't land like a punchline, it landed like a confession. The hesitation, the way he looked away, it all felt too raw, too revealing. And then Schulz went quiet for a second, eyes on the table, before saying the line that sent chills through the internet, "I believe she's an archetype." The room froze. Rogan tilted his head slightly, waiting. Schulz continued, slow, almost whispering, "A type of person built to manipulate emotion. I don't buy that love story. I don't think it ever existed. I'm not like the public thinks." Boom! That sentence broke the internet. Rogan gave this soft laugh. Not one of amusement, but recognition. Like someone hearing a rumor they've already heard behind closed doors. He didn't confirm it, didn't argue it. He just leaned back, smirking faintly, eyes distant. That silence between them was electric. The tension was so thick you could practically hear the air buzzing. No one dared to interrupt. No one shifted in their chair. They all just sat there, letting those words echo. Archetype, manipulate, not real love. It felt less like a podcast and more like a confession caught on tape. Schulz's voice got lower, heavier, like he was realizing what he'd just unleashed but couldn't stop. He started breaking down her interviews, her public appearances, the polished speeches, the carefully written posts, all the parts of her that looked too perfect. "None of it felt real to me," he said flat out. Her sadness looked rehearsed, her calm was calculated, and those interviews, too polished to be spontaneous. And that's when it clicked for everyone watching. This wasn't a joke, and it wasn't gossip. It was something deeper, something they were both carefully circling but not naming. You could feel the walls closing in, like they'd stumbled onto something they shouldn't have said, but it was too late. The moment was already out there, living on in slow motion clips, captions, and conspiracy threads everywhere. He said, "It's like she's reading from a script that was already written for the public." The second those words left his mouth, the entire room froze. You could feel the tension crawling through the screen. Rogan leaned back in that signature way, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, lips twitching into that knowing smirk he gets whenever someone steps too close to something sensitive. The fans who've watched him for years caught it immediately, that look that says, "You're right, but stop right there." That was the moment everything changed. To Rogan's diehard fans, that look was confirmation. To everyone else, it was mystery. Thick, heavy, and magnetic. That single sentence became the spark that set off a cultural quake. Within minutes, people clipped the segment, captioned it, "They know something," and shared it everywhere. Reddit threads popped up overnight, TikTok creators slowed down the footage, and comment sections filled with lines like, "This explains everything." By sunrise, that tiny 2-minute clip had millions of views. What started as a casual moment had turned into a signal, a quiet but powerful ripple spreading through the internet like static electricity. The question everyone was now obsessed with, what do they know that we don't? The studio fell into silence, that thick kind of silence that feels louder than words. It wasn't awkward, it was loaded. You could almost feel the air tighten, like everyone there knew they were teetering on the edge of something they weren't supposed to say. Just a few seconds of stillness, but it hit like thunder. It felt like they'd both brushed against a truth too real and one that couldn't be said out loud. Then came Rogan's move, that sharp sideways glance, eyes locked on Schulz, half grin creeping across his face. Not playful, not casual, calculated. And then in that low, slow tone that makes the crowd lean in, he said, "Yeah, there's a reason for that." 6 words, and the internet exploded. It didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like code, like he'd just confirmed something hidden in plain sight. For a full second, nobody breathed. Rogan didn't change the subject, didn't laugh it off. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, lips pressed into that faint grin that says he knows exactly what he's doing. He repeated it, quieter this time. There's a reason for that, and that was it. No follow-up, no context, just pure silence. And that silence spoke volumes. The reaction online was instant. Fans clipped and slowed the footage, brightened the frame, zoomed in on Rogan's eyes, reading every twitch like it was a confession. Emotion analysis videos flooded TikTok, creators counting micro expressions matching Rogan's blinks to memory recall patterns. Some claimed his breathing changed like he was hiding a truth. Others focused on Schulz and his eyes darting away just before Rogan spoke, calling it proof that it wasn't a mistake, but a signal. The theories were everywhere. Some people swore Rogan and Schulz were speaking in coded language, dropping hints to avoid saying something that could get them in trouble. And the craziest part? The episode had nothing to do with Charlie Kirk, not even close. His name wasn't in the title, the topic, or the tags. That's what made it eerie. Why bring up his widow out of nowhere? Why go silent right after? And why did Rogan's "there's a reason" sound less like a comment and more like a memory? As the clip went viral, people demanded answers. Comments poured in by the thousands. He knows something! They slipped up on purpose. This wasn't random. Fans waited for Rogan to say anything, a post, a laugh, even a denial, but he didn't. Not a word, no tweets, no reactions, not even a subtle emoji. He just stayed silent, and that silence made it even worse, because that quiet, that deliberate non-reaction became the loudest statement of all. The less he said, the more people filled in the blanks. Everyone created their own version of what that look meant, what the pause meant, what the grin meant. And soon, 1,000 small theories fused together into one massive storm of speculation. Rogan's silence became its own storyline, a mystery that kept feeding itself. And while the internet tore itself apart searching for clues, the focus started shifting. Right back to her, Erika Kirk, the widow who once represented calm and grace in the middle of chaos and was suddenly back in the spotlight, and not in a good way. Her old interviews resurfaced, her social media posts were reanalyzed, and every move she made was judged under a harsher light. People started questioning everything. Was her poise strength or a mask? Were those tears genuine or perfectly timed? Was that trembling voice emotion or performance? The internet couldn't stop. Every clip, every speech, every photo became part of the puzzle. What used to be seen as composure was now called control. That same calm energy that once inspired sympathy suddenly looked suspicious, like the face of someone managing an image instead of feeling loss. And it all began because of one moment, one sentence, one pause, one look. Rogan's silence flipped the script completely. Overnight, she went from widow to mystery, from sympathy to scrutiny. Fans who used to defend her were now posting side-by-side comparisons saying, "Look, the body language matches and her expressions never change." The internet had turned into an investigation unit, and she was the case. Then it got even wilder. The old clips of Erika started resurfacing like ghosts. Footage from memorial events, past interviews, charity appearances, all dragged back into the spotlight. Creators slowed them down, matched them against Rogan's clip, and claimed they'd found parallels. Every word she'd ever said, every slight smile, every carefully folded hand, analyzed to death. Even her old speeches, once praised as emotional and heartfelt, were now dissected like evidence in a mystery. Was it sincerity or performance, pain or precision? No one agreed, but everyone had an opinion. The tone shifted completely. What used to sound like healing now sounded like branding. And the question echoing across the internet hit like a drum. Is she hiding something or protecting someone? That once peaceful silence that made people call her strong now looked tactical, like a silence planned, not natural. And the louder the speculation got, the more her quiet felt like strategy. It didn't feel like the end of a story anymore. It felt like the beginning of something carefully unfolding, something scripted long before anyone realized. Rogan's silence didn't just spark rumors, it became the story. Every pause, every look, every breath had turned into evidence. And by the time the internet caught its breath, one thing was crystal clear. Nothing about that podcast moment was random. It was the spark that turned silence into suspicion and suspicion into a storm. And just like that, it all came full circle. What started as one quiet moment on a podcast had turned into a global obsession. A whisper here, a look there, and suddenly millions were convinced there was a secret buried beneath the silence. Hashtags were trending, theories were multiplying, and everyone wanted to be the one who figured it out. Erika's calm only made it worse, or smarter, depending on how you saw it. She didn't post explanations, she didn't give interviews, she didn't even flinch. That silence became her armor and her power. Because in a world where everyone's desperate to speak, being unreadable is the ultimate move. It kept people guessing, arguing, and obsessing, and somehow it made her even more mysterious. Meanwhile, Rogan and Schulz just carried on like nothing happened. New episodes, new jokes, acting like the chaos didn't exist. But deep down, everyone could feel it. That clip had changed something. Fans still replayed it daily, convinced those pauses and grins carried a message the world wasn't supposed to hear. Maybe they really did stumble onto something bigger. Maybe it was all coincidence, or maybe it was all part of a carefully crafted plan. Because that's the beauty of silence. It gives everyone space to fill in their own version of the truth. In the end, it stopped being about Erika, Rogan, or Schulz. It became about us, the watchers, the analyzers, the ones who can't stop scrolling. Because mystery is addictive and silence, it's no longer quiet, it's strategy. So whether this was an accident or a masterpiece, one thing's for sure. They turned a single moment into a living legend. And in a world where words fade fast, it's the silence that lingers the longest. If you think you've cracked the truth, drop your theory in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Because in this story, the silence might be over, but the mystery, it's just getting started.